Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. Matthew chapter 24. It's the big second coming chapter in the book of Matthew. And it seems to be so important that it became its own part of the Pearl of Great Price as a Joseph Smith translation. We're going to look at verses 39, 42, and 44. And tell me if you see a pattern. Verse 39, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. 42, watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. 44, therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. This is why I don't try and put together timelines of the future and try and figure out what still has to happen before the second coming can take place. I mean, we do look at all the different prophecies, but I remain flexible. I don't have a rigid stance when it comes to, we haven't seen this yet or that yet. Well, I want to talk about the Salt Lake Temple today. I guess I spoke too soon about the foundation and the seismic upgrade being done, which I could have sworn that we read an article that said that it was done. But I think a lot of people think that the second coming will not happen until the Salt Lake Temple is done, until after the rededication. And I'm not so sure about that. I'm not going to say that it can't happen, because if it did happen, it would definitely happen in an hour that a lot of us don't think that it would happen. So this is Newsroom, Temple Square Renovation Update, June 2026. This is an article from June 30th. After 2 decades of planning and more than 6 years of construction, the Salt Lake Temple of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints now rests on its new base isolation system. Quote, "The system is unlike anywhere else in the world," said Nathan Espinoza, assistant project manager with Jacobson Construction. Beginning Thursday, June 25th, 2026, crews removed more than 1,500 bolts connecting 392 plates to the base isolators. The plates kept the 98 base isolators, located 20 feet below the temple, stabilized during installation and the weight transfer. Quote, "This is a milestone moment for this whole project," said Brad Bain, or I don't know how that's pronounced, General Superintendent with Jacobson Construction. Quote, "The temple is set free." That's an interesting phrase. And it makes me think about one particular prophecy that has to do with the great earthquake when Christ comes. That's going to affect the entire world. We've talked about this many times on the channel. This may be why. I mean, maybe the church would do it anyway. Maybe the church would do a seismic upgrade. But the prophet, I don't know if they were probably already talking about this before President Nelson became president of the church, but whoever the prophet was at the time probably received revelation prompting him to do this sooner than later, in that they really need to make sure that the temple was secure. That's my thought. I feel like this is getting ready for that great earthquake that's going to come. All right, so he says the temple is set free to move now during an earthquake. So a big deal for us. And that's all I had for this article. So again, I always felt, ever since I started this channel, that Christ could come anytime, even before the seismic upgrade was complete. But now that it is complete, and it seems like for sure this time, I hope, now we really might be in that red zone. You'll have to let me know what you think, but couldn't you picture it that way? It's like the temple is not yet dedicated. Christ comes. We have the earthquake. It catches a lot of people by surprise, especially the ones that think that the temple had to be rededicated before he could come. And then after his coming, I don't know how temple dedications will go moving forward, but he'll actually be here in person as it's dedicated. Maybe it'd be something similar to. I know a lot of people have drawn the parallel between Christ coming to his temple after all the destruction um, that the Nephites experienced. And it doesn't talk about a temple being dedicated, but you just have that imagery of him coming to his temple. Maybe in the Book of Mormon that was, well, okay, I don't know. That wasn't the main temple. But anyway, the point is, maybe that just, it might fit the way that it's described in the Book of Mormon. There's lots of destruction. He comes to his temple. This temple would be safe from the earthquake, and then we would move on into the millennium. I don't know. Now, I wanted to talk more about the Great Earthquake, but before we do, I wanted to give you an update on this Venezuela earthquake situation. So, I'm recording this on June 30th. Venezuela quake update. Death toll tops 1,900 as search efforts intensify. This is from Newsweek. It goes on to say NASA's early satellite analysis suggests nearly 60,000 buildings may have been damaged or destroyed. I've tried to keep on top of earthquakes. I have a spreadsheet that we're going to look at where I collect data on earthquakes, but the number of buildings damaged or destroyed, I'm not too familiar with what that looks like for any given earthquake, but 60,000 seems like a lot. That seems like a big number. And then later, it says more than 68,000 people were reported missing within 3 days of the disaster, a number that continues to fluctuate as communications remain down and entire neighborhoods remain inaccessible. So let's go to my spreadsheet for earthquakes. And let's see, let me zoom in here. Yeah, I don't have a number for the number of buildings damaged or destroyed. I was getting confused for a minute with my wildfires spreadsheet. I do have some of those numbers for buildings destroyed and damaged. But on this, I only have the strength of the different earthquakes. This is by year and death toll. So right now, 1,900 confirmed. So let's just plug that number in just for now. 1,900. Actually, no, sorry. Let's look at the graph first. So I have a graph that's based on that data. Okay, so this is from 1985 until present. And this graph depicts death toll by year. When President Oaks gave his big Second Coming talk in the April 2004 General Conference, later that year, the day after Christmas, there was the big Indonesian earthquake and tsunami that resulted in over 200,000 people dying. We had an earthquake in 2008. I'm not sure which one that was, but the total death toll for that year was 88,000. So that's really high. And then we had the Haitian earthquake in 2010 that also killed over 200,000. And then things quieted down for a while. 2015, we had 9,600. And then in 2023, about 64,000. That was from the Turkey earthquake. It was both Turkey and Syria, but mostly Turkey. That's the one that caused that Mount of Olives in Turkey to cleave in twain and form a chasm right in the middle of an olive grove on a mountain that looks like the Mount of Olives, which I feel like that's a huge sign. So this is what it's looked like. Okay. Here's this year, 2026. It's on the low end, at least until these numbers are finalized. So let's go ahead and plug in 1,900 because that's how many have been confirmed. So that being the case, it doesn't really move it that much. Let's see, let me move it over even more. Click on this. Yeah, 1,900. So It updated, so if it remained at 1900, this is what the graph would look like. But now, let's see what it would look like if it was more like 68,000. So 68,000. And it's going to look more like this. We're going to have a bigger spike than we did in 2023 from that Turkey, Syria earthquake. So we'll see how it plays out. Let's pray for them and pray that it's not that large. But this is what we're potentially looking at. Okay. All right. So let's go back to talking about the Salt Lake Temple. The renovation started under President Nelson's presidency. Here's a iconic photo of him looking at the Salt Lake Temple under renovation. He used the Salt Lake Temple as an object lesson many times in General Conference. In fact, I should have pulled this spreadsheet up, but for 7 General Conferences in a row, 7 in a row, each conference he would give one talk where he would use the Salt Lake Temple as an object lesson. Everything from strengthening our spiritual foundations to removing the old debris in our life, getting rid of our favorite sins and such. It felt like this whole thing has been a big hint as to what we need to do to prepare for the second coming and how seriously we should be taking this period of time that we're in right now, especially considering what we experienced in 2020. It was basically in 2020 when the renovations began. And you had that earthquake in March that caused the angel Moroni to drop his trumpet. That kind of kicked things off in a sense. It accelerated what they were going to do with the statue because of the earthquake. And that felt like it was a sign. So, and President Nelson said in 2019, so the same year that the renovation was announced, I think it was announced in 2019, in the April General Conference, that's when he said that time is running out. I feel like this picture is almost like a clock. It's like a countdown, in a sense. If you think of it in that sense, you look at the Salt Lake Temple in the background and the progress that's being made. And I don't know if it is a countdown, but I do feel like the Salt Lake Temple has something to do with the timeline of the second coming. And now that it seems like the seismic upgrades are finished, and now that the temple has been set free, we might be in the last couple seconds for all anybody knows. We'll find out soon. Okay, so let's go to President Nelson's October 2021 General Conference talk called The Temple and Your Spiritual Foundation. Let's just read some of this really quick. As you know, we are performing major renovations on the historic Salt Lake Temple. This complex project includes major reinforcement of its original foundation, which has served well for more than a century. But this temple must stand much longer. I have a whole collection of quotes talking about the Salt Lake Temple and other temples lasting into the millennium. And I should add this one, because I don't think I have this one on that spreadsheet. We are sparing no effort to give this venerable temple, which had become increasingly vulnerable, a foundation that will withstand the forces of nature into the millennium. Again, this whole thing, you can apply it to the church as a whole, that the church needs to be reinforced. And we've seen lots of changes in the church, big changes. Big things are happening with the church, but then we can also apply this to us individually. And I think that we need to. A foundation that will withstand the forces of nature into the millennium. In like manner, it is now time that we each implement extraordinary measures, perhaps measures we have never taken before, to strengthen our personal spiritual foundations. Unprecedented times call for unprecedented measures. My dear brothers and sisters, these are the latter days. If you and I are to withstand the forthcoming perils and pressures, it is imperative that we each have a firm spiritual foundation built upon the rock of our Redeemer, Jesus Christ. And then toward the end, this is the part that made everybody gasp. My dear brothers and sisters, when renovations on the Salt Lake Temple are completed, there will be no safer place during an earthquake in the Salt Lake Valley than inside that temple. Big hint, I think. Big hint, both for your spiritual life and also temporally when the physical effects of the second coming become a reality. Um, and in this video, we're going to be talking primarily about the Great Earthquake. I think that this renovation probably has a lot to do with the Great Earthquake. Before we talk about that, though, I just want to point out this really interesting thing that I had noticed a while ago. So I have this is my quotes A through Z spreadsheet. This is row 461. Russell M. Nelson, Earthquakes and Global Pandemics. I had seen or noted that in the October 1993 General Conference, he gave a talk called Combating Spiritual Drift, Our Global Pandemic. It just feels like the name of the talk and some of what he says here is like a foreshadowing. It was like a foreshadowing of his own presidency. So at this time, he was in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. It had almost been 10 years since he joined the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Up here in this first paragraph, he talks about the fact that he was a surgeon and had performed 7,000 operations. If you've been watching my channel for a while, President Nelson did a lot of things in sevens, and it seems like intentionally, and sometimes unintentionally. Just seven would show up with President Nelson many times. I have a separate spreadsheet for it. But in this talk, he talks about the fact that he performed 7,000 operations. Later on, he talks about the great earthquake in Armenia in December 1988. And then after that, he talks about the name of his talk. In the talk, he points out the name of the talk, Combating Spiritual Drift, Our Global Pandemic. I don't know. It just feels like this talk was a foreshadowing of his own future as president of the church. Now, let's go to a new row that I created. I thought I already had this, but I guess I didn't. So this is the new row 187 for earthquake, great earthquake. Let's do it like this. We got Elder Orson Pratt. This is one of the only kind of like timeline of events that describe how the very last events are going to play out. I don't know that this is necessarily authoritative. Elder Orson Pratt kind of ventured off and he did speculate a lot, but I still pay attention to him because he was an apostle. So I just save it and consider it. And I do that with all church leadership. But if there's only one person that ever said anything, then you should probably just take it with a grain of salt. But the more it's repeated, the more likely it is that that is actual doctrine. So this may just be him reading the scriptures and kind of putting it together according to his own understanding. The only part that I want to point out is this. He talks about the two witnesses, and then he says, then a great earthquake will take place, and these two witnesses will be caught up to heaven. Okay, so that's what he said about the great earthquake. Then we're going to move on to Elder Bruce R. McConkie. This is from New, and we just covered this recently, but I guess it's appropriate that we cover it again. This is from Doctrinal New Testament Commentary, Volume 3, page 543. Three natural changes in the earth, all apparently growing out of one transcendent happening, are here named. And then he puts Revelation chapter 16, verses 17 to 21. So let's read that before we read what he has to say. And I actually want to also include verse 16. And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. And the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne saying, "It is done." And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. So there it is, Armageddon, and then he talks about the great earthquake, as well as thunders and lightnings. And the great city was divided into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great. And that definitely does not sound great. Um, I guess we'll see how that plays out. Okay, so back to Elder Bruce R. McConkie. Again, he said, three natural changes in the earth, all apparently growing out of one transcendent happening, are here named as attending our Lord's second coming. They are, number one, Earth's land masses shall unite, islands and continents shall become one land. Number two, every valley shall be exalted and every mountain shall be made low. The rugged terrain of today shall level out into a millennial garden. Number three, such an earthquake as has never been known since man's foot has planted on this planet shall attend these changes in the earth's surface and appearance. And fourthly, as recorded elsewhere, the great deep, presumably the Atlantic Ocean, shall return to its place on the north, and the earth shall be like as it was in the days before it was divided. So the great earthquake is kind of a big deal, and yeah, it seems like it has something to do with the continents and islands coming back together, the mountains being made low, literally, the valleys being made high, everything leveling out, literally, and and then possibly other changes. Which he has more to say about that. What I'm about to read to you, he does say, I'm pretty sure he says that this is his speculation. Um, we're just going to read this first paragraph here. This comes from his book called The Millennial Messiah, The Second Coming of the Son of Man. As we consider the reeling of the earth to and fro, and the total realignment of its land masses, incident to the second coming, and as we consider the burning of the vineyard by fire to destroy the wicked, as they were once destroyed by water in the days of Noah, we are faced with a somewhat difficult problem relative to the rainbow. We say difficult because not all things relative to it have been revealed, and we only have a few slivers of divine truth upon which to build our house of understanding. In the eternal sense, nothing is difficult once the whole matter has been revealed to minds prepared and qualified to receive and understand. Let us lay a foundation for the place the rainbow is destined to play in the second coming by recounting the circumstances under which it came into being. Seed time and harvest, in the sense of one season following another, exists because the axis of the earth is tilted 23.5 degrees from the upright. This is the reason we have summer and winter, spring and fall. The first reference in the scriptures to seasons as we know them is in connection with the flood of Noah. There is a presumption that prior to the flood, there were no seasons because the axis of the earth was upright. And a similar presumption that when the millennium comes and the earth returns to its original paradisiacal state, once again, the seasons as we know them will cease, and that seed time and harvest will go on concurrently at all times. So, this might be what the earthquake is. Uh, the earth itself going upright, not being tilted anymore. I would love to know from a scientist what they would predict would happen. And I don't know, maybe there's an article out there somewhere that would explain what would happen if the Earth was to suddenly lose its tilt, become upright. I wondered how that might affect the continents, if at all, according to science. But according to Elder Bruce R. McConkie, he did say that it was a presumption, meaning that we don't know for sure. It's just speculation on his part. But I think it's probably a pretty good speculation because what he says makes a lot of sense and it's sound. So, land masses coming together, um, mountains being made low, valleys made high, and the entire earth itself becoming upright again, if that is what it was like before the flood. Yeah, that would probably affect, the entire earth and would cause an earthquake such as has never been experienced before, except for maybe um, before the flood and before the continents separated. Only, well, they say that this one would be, it must be greater because the scripture says it's greater than anything before. So I guess it would be more dramatic. Um. So anyway, again, we're talking about this because there's this news that's come out that now the temple is resting on its new base isolation system, which I thought it already was. Um, Again, another highlight is this. The system is unlike anywhere else in the world. Makes sense. This is our headquarters temple. And now the temple is set free to move now during an earthquake. So it's a big deal for us. That may be an understatement. All right. Well, that's all that I have for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.